Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. I'm François Picard. With me, Régis Le Sommier. He's Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the leading French news weekly magazine Paris Match, and the author in French of David Petraeus, A Beautiful Day in the Tigris Valley. A Beautiful Day in the Tigris Valley, I guess a reference to Iraq back in, 2006, 2007?
2004.
2004.
When Petraeus was in charge of his AO area of operation, was the north part of Iraq. He was stationed in Mosul. And every day during his briefing, he would start with, this is Eagle 6, which is his code name in the army. This is Eagle 6 speaking. Another beautiful day in the Tigris River Valley. That's how he would start every day. What's important about this time, this particular time, it's a time where Petraeus, for the first time, was able to experiment his ideas during the occupation of Iraq, and with very, very promising results. For what was striking is at the end of his term over there, there was virtually no insurgency activity, whereas the rest of Iraq was going into flames. And Petraeus was able, with his soldier, with a very skillful approach and a different approach of the population, a different look towards the population, to actually keep his area quiet, whereas the rest of Iraq was very, very troubled.
At a very volatile time. General David Petraeus, his name associated with the concept of counterinsurgency. He's since gone on to lead the troops in Iraq, lead the troops in Afghanistan, and now head of the CIA. This term of counterinsurgency, in your book, you attribute part of David Petraeus' thinking and putting into place of that counterinsurgency philosophy to a French general.
That's right, General Bijard, that's his name. And Petraeus actually gave him credit to a point that he called him his mentor, one of his mentors.
The two even corresponded.
Yes, they corresponded at the very
but never met.
They never met. They've always exchanged letters. What's interesting is they exchanged letters and photos at the beginning of their career. Actually, Petraeus was carrying in his office a picture of General Bijard and would question his visitors on, do you know who that guy is? And most of them didn't know. And then he would tell them about the great accomplishment of Bijard, especially in fighting modern warfares in Indochina and Algeria. What's interesting is that these experiences, what Bijard, however, even though his career was tainted after allegations of torture in Algeria, Bijard actually put in place principle in order to fight guerrilla warfare. Bijard, from a very early stage, said, contrary to what the higher-ups in the French army thought, that we should fight like the enemy fight. We should become Viet Congs. We should have their mentality. We should eat like them. We should almost dress like them, if we want to fight them better. The idea behind is that if you want to fight better your enemy, you have to understand him. And that's what Petraeus did. When you take the example of the decade at war the US has fought, at the beginning, no one understood what was going on with Al-Qaeda. They didn't knew what was this enemy able to actually carry those attacks in the middle of New York. Nobody knew really who they were. What Petraeus did, taking the example of Bijard, was get into their head. If you want to fight them, then you have to put in place a structure and a technique that allows you to get into their heads.
How do you explain the fact that we're drawing on the experiences, counterinsurgency, guerrilla warfare tactics that date back to, 1954?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you explain that in 2007, at one point you say in the book that the field manuals for the U.S. Army resembled more World War II?
That's right. There's two explanations. First, the higher-ups in the U.S. Army most of them never admitted defeat in Vietnam. It was a crushing defeat, and defeat for Americans is something very hard to fathom and very hard to take. And they've always accused the general public, the media, the politicians back home of making the defeat in Vietnam. Petraeus, I've thought, and a few others only, I thought the army should look at itself and should look at what was the mistakes. Some people even said we did everything wrong in Indochina. The French did everything wrong before us, but we kept on following, and we fought the wrong war. We fought the war, the previous war, like the previous war, and so first right after Vietnam, contrary to what should have been done, in order of taking example of what happened, they just threw it under the rug and said, from now on, the U.S. Army would never let himself get into a quagmire like this one.
So he misses out on a bunch of previous conflicts, the first Gulf War most notably. Are you suggesting, because he does his military training in the 1970s,
yes,
and he climbs the ladder of the military. You describe it well in the book. All this time he's biting his lip, waiting for the moment when he can put things into practice, and that moment only comes when he's in Iraq.
Well, that's pretty much how it happened, because Petraeus is the typical scholar warrior. He's a guy who has spent half of his life studying. He has a degree at Princeton University, which is pretty rare. He was the only military actually to take that year at Princeton. He's always had an open mind. He's very curious about things, which is different from the regular general in the U.S. Army, and has been for a long time. And Petraeus has always tried to balance his military career and his intellectual formation. And the thing is, he's been tied to the ground. Sometimes he's been, doing maneuvers with the armies, and he's been at work with them. But also, he was able to stay for a long time in Washington, D.C., to understand the whole beltway, how it works with politics, how the interaction between military and politics works. And he's been very skilled at that too. And his ground of experimentation his time came when the Iraq War started.
All right, the whole counterinsurgency process is based on, as you say, proximity with the local population, getting into the head of the enemy. Nowadays, you see the Obama administration and the increased use of drones. This is all automated. It's no longer human intelligence.
Well, human intelligence has to be used in order for the drones to work. It's a different war. A drone strike costs so much less than putting troops on the ground and getting yourself involved in occupying a land for God knows how long. That's the problem. The problem with the shrinking economy at this particular moment, with the worldwide crisis, with the fact that the budgets, military budgets, are being cut, is that the U.S. has an incredible power, has an incredible experience, but doesn't have the strength or the will to invade countries or to sustain an occupation.
When you interviewed Petraeus at the headquarters of the CIA, did you have a sense that he was for this new policy or fatalistic about it?
Well, it's hard to say. I think David Petraeus has worked with the CIA for a long time. Now he's leading the CIA. He's partly responsible for militarization of the CIA. When you take the example of the Abbottabad raid that killed Osama bin Laden, it's an A to Z operation controlled by the CIA, and enrolling an element of the army, which is the Team 6, SEALs Team 6, which is new. And so the CIA is at the top of its game in those particular matters at that particular moment. So I think it's a bit odd to see a guy who has publicized a new philosophy or making warfares, trying to correct mistakes that were made in Iraq and Afghanistan, at the head of the most lethal machine probably ever made, which is the CIA now. It's a bit bizarre, but in a way, it's a far less costly war. It's a war where, you can have, collateral damage, which, has been strengthened. And right now, one of the key argument for recruitment for Al-Qaeda is the drone strike. The drone strike is number one. It's no longer number one, the occupation of Afghanistan or Iraq. It's the drone strikes and the result, what they cause, that has been put forward as a recruiting tool for Al-Qaeda. So it's a very easy. It's not easy, but it's much more efficient, and in a way
the dollars and cents are weighing
absolutely.
on it. Final word, Régis Le Sommier, the photos in the book by photojournalist Chris Hondros, who died covering the conflict in Libya subsequently. You describe him as the man among the press corps who knew David Petraeus the best.
Yeah, that's right, because both of them spent a very long time in Iraq. Chris was one of the most prolific photographers of the Iraq War, who has brought to home some very important image from that war. And they came across a lot on the field over there. And as a matter of fact, when Chris and I were covering Iraq and Afghanistan, we've came across Petraeus a number of times, sometimes unexpectedly. We would be with soldiers, and all of a sudden, Petraeus shows up, on a visit, and we link up with him and have a tour of the neighborhood. That happened to us once in Iraq and once in Afghanistan, and it was very nice to see that person, because he would be always very open. You have to bear in mind that for photographers and journalists covering these conflicts, for a long time there was a level of hostility within the U.S. Army, and especially generals were very suspicious of the work of the press, taking us. Yes.
In this case, you got the unfettered access that you probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Probably, and Petraeus was always friendly and always very skilled with his communication, very skilled with the media, but knew exactly what we wanted, and was eager to communicate with us.
All right, it's a great read, and I hope it's translated soon into English.
I hope so too.
Régis Le Sommier, thanks for joining us. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 interview.